Hi guys, so this is a quick little video going over fermentation. Remember that fermentation occurs in the cytoplasm without oxygen. So if oxygen or little oxygen is present, this is what's going to occur. And remember, because this is happening in the cytoplasm, this can occur in all cells, and this is the major way that single-cell organisms such as yeast, which is actually fungi or bacteria, or viruses actually produce their own energy. So in this case, we start with glucose that originally came from the Calvin cycle, and it goes through glycolysis, does its thing, and then continues on to further break down into something called pyruvic acid. So in the very end of this, I get some ATP and some NADPH, which go on to power the cell, and that's all the cell has to use. So basically, it ingests glucose from a photosynthetic organism. Remember that even algae, which are photosynthetic and single cell, create their own energy, and so this is getting energy from something else. It ingests it, it breaks down those molecules using enzymes, and takes that glucose and then eventually makes pyruvic acid. And because I'm going from a big molecule to a smaller molecule, I have extra energy being donated, so this energy that's coming off of glucose is then yielded to make ATP, and I'm also giving off some energy here to bond NAD plus and hydrogen that originally came from glucose to make NADH. You can see here too that some CO2 and then eventually ethyl alcohol is also made. So that's alcoholic fermentation. This is happening in the cytoplasm of yeast cells. So if you know anyone that makes their own beer or wine, that is why you have to use a priming sugar. You have to feed those yeasts to get them to produce the ethyl alcohol that you're looking for. The other one that we're more familiar with as humans is lactic acid fermentation. So in this case, it's not that your cells are completely deprived of oxygen. Remember that your cells are always surrounded by oxygen. It's just the concentration of it. It's not high enough to yield that pyruvic acid then goes into the mitochondria and breaks down to produce ATP. Here your body is just trying to maintain itself. Okay? So again, we have glucose coming in from, in this case, digestion. So we eat carbohydrates, our body breaks them down, and we get glucose that's going to diffuse into our cells and into the cytoplasm. That glucose is going to go through a series of chemical reactions through glycolysis. It's going to donate energy. It's going to give off some energy to bond ADP to a phosphate group to yield ATP. It's also going to break down and give us some H's and then some extra energy to bond NADH together from NAD plus a hydrogen. So again, we get pyruvate, which is pyruvic acid, and then from there, it breaks down further to help with this process right here to give us lactate or lactic acid. Lactic acid is the end thing. This is not right, sorry. So this should be ethyl alcohol. Which I think I spelled wrong. Ethyl alcohol, ATP, and NADPH, and this one is not pyruvic acid, it's lactic acid, and ATP and NADH. So lactic acid is what builds up in our muscles and makes our muscles really sore. So when you start doing a new exercise or you start using muscles that you haven't used before, they are oxygen deprived because you're doing aerobic respiration or you're exercising, right? And you're not getting enough oxygen to those cells. Those cells are trying to contract and relax at the speed that you want them to while you're exercising. they're using up and consuming that oxygen faster than it's being replaced, and so your body goes into survival mode and starts to make that lactic acid. And that's what really builds up in your muscles and makes them sore. So because this occurs in an oxygen low environment, the only way to get rid of that lactic acid is to bring in oxygen. And so that's why it's really important when you get done exercising, especially when you are working different muscle groups that you haven't worked before, to stretch. So when you stretch, your muscles actually get pulled apart a little bit, which increases the amount of blood flow that can get there. During a stretch, you're supposed to take lots of nice deep breaths, highly saturating your blood with oxygen, so that blood can get then delivered to those stretched muscles and then clear up that lactic acid in there and get rid of that soreness that you have. So I end with lactic acid, ATP, and NADH. ATP and NADH then goes on to help power those muscle cells. You're not going to get the same amount of energy that you would from cellular respiration, but you have enough to keep the cell at least going. So this is happening in the cytoplasm of a muscle cell. So this is actually happening in our cells.